Blog Talk Radio.
Coach on Blog Talk Radio. I'm your host, Edie Summers, and today my guest is Tami Simon. Tami is the founder and publisher of Sounds True, an independent multimedia company dedicated to disseminating spiritual wisdom. Tami began studying with Reggie Ray in 2001 and began teaching Meditating with the Body introductory workshops in 2007. Her areas of special interest include authentic leadership and applying spiritual principles to organizational life. Tami lives in Boulder, Colorado with her partner, Julie Kramer. And I see Tami here on the line. I'm just going to open up her mic. And hi, Tami. Is this you?
It is.
Hi.
Nice to be with you.
Thank you so much. I am so grateful to have you here today. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Oh, good. Well, I can't tell you what an honor this is for me, and I've been listening to you interview people for years, and so I'm just really grateful to have a chance to interview you today for a change.
Exciting. Wonderful.
Yes. So I just wanted to maybe ask you to start with your story wherever it feels comfortable for you. I'd like people to maybe hear a little bit about you more personally, if that's okay with you. How did you get started? I'd love to know how you found It Sounds True, but where did your journey begin?
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, I'm not sure if I would, the question of, you mean like the journey as in my personal spiritual quest? Where did that begin, or?
Yeah. I'm interested in both, but I think that's a great place to start because I know that Sounds True is all about spiritual wisdom. So I think that sounds fantastic to start there.
Sure. Well, as a teenager, when I read books by Herman Hesse and Alan Watts, I had a sense of homecoming and a sense that there were people that were speaking to a longing in me that was the strongest thing inside of me that had not been named in my family or in the school system really until I found those authors and their books. And that lit up something in me. And you could say at that point the quest was born when I read Siddhartha and heard about the possibility of enlightenment or liberation and the idea that you could sit by a river and become like that river, inclusive of everything without end. I think it resonated in thing and birthed really a sense of directionality in my life. And then I went to college thinking that I would be a philosophy major so that I could study the meaning of life. But I quickly landed in the religion department because I was interested in the personal voice, the subjective voice, not so much studying abstract ideas, but what does this actually mean inside not just the human heart, but my human heart? What does it mean inside of me to be on this type of quest? And I started studying the life and teachings of the great mystics, and it was really their work that I was the most excited about. And the deeper that I got into reading the mystics and writing about their ideas, the more I had the sense that any true mystic worth their salt wouldn't get a degree in mysticism. And it wasn't really an academic pursuit. And so I left Swarthmore College and I went to Sri Lanka and India and Nepal. And it was at that point in my life during this year abroad that I was introduced to the practice of meditation. And that was a huge turning point for me when I actually started meditating and discovered that there was a technology, an approach, methodology that could help me actually be with myself in a very, very deep way. And at that point, I was 20 years old, 21. I dedicated my life during those travels to bringing not just the teachings of meditation, but the teachings of all of the inner approaches to knowing, to personal, deep, non-conceptual knowing, that I wanted to bring those approaches to as many people as possible. And I returned with that cry, if you will, in my being, and that trumpet call in my sense of how I wanted to contribute to the world. And I did not finish my academic degree, much to the disappointment of my family, but instead moved out to Boulder, where I was considering going to Naropa University for a brief period of time to study psychology and meditation, but I really just didn't have the interest in school learning at that time. And so I started volunteering at the local public radio station, interviewing spiritual teachers. And I thought that the education that I wanted, that I couldn't find in the halls of academia, I might be able to find on the radio by talking to people and asking them questions that were really important questions to me. And so it was a volunteer gig at KGNU, Boulder County Public Radio. And really, I loved it. I loved the conversation. I loved the kind of first-person learning. And at that point in my life, my father died. And so I'm 21 years old. My father died, and I inherited a small amount of money, about $50,000. And I was working as a waitress, serving greasy Chinese food to people, and knew that wasn't what I wanted to be doing. And it's kind of, there's a lot of synchronicities that happened, but basically Sounds True was born out of that environment.
Wow. What an amazing story. I'm very curious about a number of things. First of all, just meditation itself. I think that's a concept and a practice. I think that scares a lot of people, and I would love to know more about just the deep practice of meditation.
What do you think scary about it?
I don't know.
Or what might scare people?
Maybe it's just me, but I think I've heard a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't know how to sit with myself," and maybe that's what this is all about: is sitting with oneself. Is there a fear there? I'm not sure if it's fear of the unknown or what someone might find. What was your experience like when you first started meditating? I'm just wondering if maybe we can address some of those issues that people might be thinking that the fear there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things that became apparent to me is that thinking is not actually direct contact with what's happening. It's one step removed, and it's a type of abstraction, if you will, especially discursive thinking, where we're going again and again and again and again, like a record player, around the same thing. And so, for example, you could be with beautiful sunset, and yet instead of actually being there with the sunset and its beauty and its mystery and its sense of boundarylessness and its sense of just pure awesomeness, really, instead of actually melting as the sun melts down, we could be thinking about what we're going to be having for dinner or the next day, or how we need more money, or all of these things. And there can be this distance between the glory of the moment and our experience of it. We're not actually in it. And so for me, meditation was a way that I could start discovering being and what it means to receive in the moment through all of my senses, and having this appreciation of enormity and awe and timelessness. And within that, of course, some fresh and interesting and new, insightful thoughts can arrive, but that's quite different than the type of kind of busy mind, planning, worrying type of thinking that normally takes up all of the space in the field of our presence. And so for me, meditation created this huge shift where the thinking mind went in the back seat of the car instead of driving the car. And so, yeah, sure, there's still plenty of thoughts coming up all the time, but they're not driving the car anymore. There's more a sense of presence or openness that is in the front seat. And I think that might scare people because, and this is the scary part, in a sense, no one's driving the car, but yet the car still gets to all the places it needs to go. And so it's very odd. And what I mean by nobody driving the car is that, yeah, there's a sense of, you could call it a self or a sense of being or a sense of presence, but it's not held together through all of this self-imaging and idea of who I am and who I'm supposed to be and what other people think I'm supposed to be and how much money I'm supposed to have, and all of that has dropped away, and there's more a sense of open flow. And I do think that can be scary for people because there's not that same quality of control, and perhaps other people might harm us because we don't have all of our defenses and armor that we've constructed up in any given moment. Do you know what I mean? But it's also incredibly freeing, and we could even say liberating.
Yes. And it sounds amazing. And I have to say, Tami, that while I'm sitting here listening to you talking, I feel, I mean, your voice is very meditative. And I'm curious if you've always had this meditative quality to your voice, or if this is maybe something that has come through having been with meditation. Sure. But I feel like we're in a meditation right now. This is, which is kind of the whole point, right? Is to be in that altered. I mean, is it even considered an altered state, or is it just the state of being?
Well, I think I might posit that the altered state, the not natural state, is the state of contorted tightness that comes both in our bodies and in our mind. There's this sense of tangledness, tangled thoughts and going over the same kind of thing. That's actually the alteration, and that what's actually known in the tradition as, quote unquote, the natural state, that the natural state is a state more of flow, more a state of unknown unfolding, fresh in each moment. Now, you mentioned something about my voice, and, I've heard all kinds of comments about my voice from people who love it and people who hate it. I've gotten letters from people, you sound like a mortician or whatever. And I thought to myself, it's kind of like talking about somebody's face. Like, you're not really, in a certain sense, you're not responsible for your face. It's the face you were born with. And some people might like it, and some people might be like, God, I really can't stand your face, or I love your face. But it's also, I think of this line, I think it's from Abraham Lincoln, who said that everybody has responsibility for their face after the age of 40, something like that. With the idea meaning that quote. Even if you have a very beautiful face, if you're grumpy and scrunching your face and dark and negative and scowling, etc., your face is going to take on that quality. And even if you were born with a gorgeous face, I don't know how beautiful it will be. Or even if you were born maybe and your face had certain interesting distortions or didn't look like the norm, if there was a light shining from your heart through you, you might appear gorgeous, even though it might be a strange type of gorgeousness. So anyway, I think about the voice a lot like the face.
That is so interesting. And, well, I was thinking of just the energy coming through you, but also when you're speaking about someone's face, I mean, or presence, I mean, there's just it's really, and even when we're speaking about beauty, I can't remember who said this. I think it's Marianne Williamson. She said that beauty is radiance of the soul, and I always loved that, because I think that's really what's happening there. That's what true beauty is. But yes, I do think there is I do feel that you have a meditative, a very insightful quality to the energy that's coming through you that happens to be your voice. But I just really, I mean, so meditation now, you talk about meditating with the body, which is a somatic experience. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering,
a really big, this was a big breakthrough and a big turning point, actually, that happened in my life. Even though I started meditating when I was 21 and then practiced in many different traditions until the age of 39, it was when I met a teacher named Reggie Ray that I was introduced to a body of practices that he developed from his own solitary retreat practice and also from the tradition of Tibetan Buddhism and Tibetan yoga and some very, very advanced practices that he was able to distill and essentialize and bring forward to an open audience of beginning practitioners. So really a brilliant, innovative body of work. And in it, what he was able to bring to people, and part of this is what he saw. He saw that many people had been meditating for a long time, but that they were actually like floating heads on the meditation cushion. So there was a sense of struggling with the posture and actually being somewhat disembodied while meditating.
Right.
And that actually the real fulfillment and transformation that can come from meditation can best come, and actually I think requires, that we're fully in our bodies. And one of the things that means is that we learn to relax while we're on the meditation cushion. And I noticed for myself that there was a quality often of tension. I was trying to keep my back straight and, my hip hurt, and et cetera, and that I wasn't able to actually sink, really deeply sink on the cushion. And in that sinking, connect to the energy of the earth, allow gravity to be working on me, and at the same time, mixed with that quality of relaxation and sinking, to be able to also have an alignment in the body so that the energy can flow through the central channel of the body, which is a channel that's located just directly in front of the spine. And when that central channel is open and the energy is flowing directly in front, like a river in front of the spine, and of course this is actually a huge focus in yoga. They call the central channel the Sushumna Nadi, and many of the different yogic practices actually culminate in being able to sit with the Sushumna, the central river of experience, being open. And when we're able to sit that way, there is this openness to the natural state that you and I were talking about. And so all of these different practices within meditating with the body completely transformed my approach to sitting, and really they transformed my life, the wholeness of my life, because there became this very powerful process of change that happens when we're rooted in the body that doesn't happen if we're experiencing life through the mind, conceptually. We just don't change that much. That's what I discovered. You can think a lot about changing. You can talk about changing. You can be articulate about it. But are you actually changing? And I had discovered in my life, even after I'd been at Sounds True for, close to 2 decades, that I knew a lot, but that I myself, in terms of how open was really my heart, how rooted was I actually in the lower centers of my body. How rooted were my feet? How open were my feet when they touched the ground? That part of me, I wasn't actually changing that much, but it was a combination, I think, of really devoting myself to the meditating with the body practices, and then also devoting myself to the practice of relationship, intimate relationship. And I actually think I couldn't even find my way into intimate relationship until I was more embodied, because I wasn't actually there. Part of me, I mean, part of me was, but part of me wasn't. And so it was this combination of becoming embodied and then really rooting in intimacy that I think has created the most growth in my life.
Wow. And there's there's so many topics that we can talk about, but I really appreciate that you brought that up. I think that this is something that I'm dealing with myself right now, so I'd love to know more about this, and I think that this is probably also something that a lot of people are maybe wanting to know, how to become more present in their intimate relationships, because isn't that, I know that this is what Matt talks about, like it's kind of like the crucible of where, I mean, the crucible of intimacy, right? We could almost call it that. I'm wondering, and for you, it sounds like what I hear you saying is that the more grounded that you became and the more that you kind of sank into your body and became present in your body, you were able to be present more in your intimate relationships. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah. I think it gave me a chance at being, I mean, I'd been in many relationships throughout my life, and yet there was a way that at the end of the day it was kind of on my terms, and I didn't know how to really open up really to being in a true 50-50 partnership with somebody. And I think it was a combination of getting to the age of 39 and realizing that I had chosen partners who perhaps equally to me weren't really that available for the depth of intimacy that I wanted, and that this was the thing I wanted more than anything else in my life, that I had achieved a certain amount of success at Sounds True, and that yet there was this huge sense of the intimate love being an unfulfilled part of me, and that somehow I was quite natural at being a spiritual aspirant, and a lot of those practices are done alone, and that I had a certain amount of comfort actually being alone. Like when you mentioned that some people are afraid of meditation, afraid of just being with themselves, I thought to myself, the thing that I was really afraid about, I think, was really being super close, really, to another person, because of a fear of being taken over or smothered, a fear of not having my own individuality honored, all kinds of things, obviously left over from early childhood imprinting, and that I really needed this combination of, you could say, the depth of psychological work with the depth of spiritual work, that I wanted all of that to come together in my life, and that it came together in the body and in my heart, really, in the sense of openness in my heart. And I had to be honest that all of the spiritual practice I had done had only opened my heart so much. I was good at loving the world in the abstract, but did I actually know how to really receive love, really, from another person up close? I mean, I could emanate out, I could do a loving-kindness meditation and emanate love out into boundless space, but put me, on a vacation for 2 weeks with the person I love the most and take my computer away from me, and I'm in an all-out white panic, I'm just sweating. I mean, no,
and you're not the only one.
Are you kidding me? Yeah, and so I was like, this is actually the area of my life that's calling me the most to grow.
Interesting. That's fascinating. And I really appreciate you sharing that, Tami, because I think that is that a lot of people do struggle with that. So I just really appreciate you being so transparent. And on that note, I wanted to ask you, I mean, I definitely want to talk about Sounds True, and I also want to talk about the development of Sounds True, because I know that you are into leadership, and I think that whenever you are, obviously developing a company of that nature, that you have to be a leader in order to do that. But first of all, in Sounds True, and I don't know if this is related or not, but you guys have been doing the self-acceptance project. Now, is this related at all to receiving love and kind of what you've just been talking about?
Yeah.
Is that the path, or one of the paths?
Well, I mean, I think you could. Yeah, I mean, I think you could see that there's this theme in my life story, which is when there's something I really want to learn about, I find a way to talk to people who I think might be brilliant on the topic and ask them my questions and see if that helps me grow and learn, and if in the process I can create an offering for other people. And maybe that's even similar to part of the motivation of what you're doing here in your radio show.
Absolutely.
And with the Self-Acceptance Project, there was a combination, I guess, of three things, I think, that led to the birth of that project. One is in my work with meditation students, I often saw that people, as they developed and as they committed themselves more and more to meditation, that the thing that often was the hardest part for people was how they worked with their own self-aggression and their own self-loathing and self-hatred, really. And that the more that we came into our bodies, the more that we discovered that the reason that we weren't in our bodies is that what we discovered waiting for us was a sense of shame, a sense of grief and pain and not being good enough, and that part of the reason people were bouncing off into discursive thinking again and again and again and leaving their bodies was because that they didn't know how to work with all of the yuck and muck that was waiting for them as unexperienced life, really, in the body. And that then when people found, let's say, a sense of shame or a sense of I wished I had loved more, I wished I had said something different, something that they felt they failed at, when they found these experiences that had yet to be touched upon, then they layered it over with, and I'm a terrible person because I don't want to feel that thing, or I'm a terrible person because of the thing I did or said. And so there were layers and layers of shame and self-aggression, and that this was a way to completely interrupt the meditative process, that this process of becoming quite fluid and surrendered and being the unknown mystery would get interrupted, almost like an emergency brake being pulled by this self-hatred and self-loathing. So this is the first thing I saw, was that, wow, I'm spending a lot of time in dialogue with meditation students, and really what we're talking about is their lack of self-acceptance. Then the second thing I saw was that this was a big issue for me personally, that things would happen and I would suddenly be like, oh my God, I just want to hang myself. And I'd be like, you want to hang yourself? It wasn't that bad. Like, just relax. No, I can't believe that I did or said that or whatever. And that I had my own very extreme reaction to shame. And then the third thing I saw was that there was something happening in the culture at large where people were more and more tuning in to self-acceptance being this huge challenge. So those are the three things that informed this 23-part series that we created as a free series at Sounds True.
Yes, and I just wanted to let people know that if they're listening here and you can see the sounds the page, the link is on here. I put it on there for soundstrue.com/self-acceptance. And if anyone is listening, say through iTunes, again, you just go to www.soundstrue.com/self-acceptance. And like you said, Tami, that is a free program. So that's a really generous offering, and it looks like just an incredible program. So thank you for putting that together for people. And I know that you just have incredible. I was also listening on iTunes to the Insights? You have I can't remember what it's called now.
It's called Insights at the Edge.
Insights at the Edge. Yes. Just
so that's a
amazing
free podcast
interviews.
series. A weekly interview show that I host. It sounds true.
It's just incredible, and it's just thank you so much for putting that out. And if it's okay with you, I just wanted to take a very short break, like 20-second break, and just reintroduce you. Is that okay? And play a little music and come back?
Of course.
Would you be okay with that? Great. Well, thank you so much. I just sometimes it's nice to talk about take a mental break and let's sink more into our bodies, and we'll come back. And I would love to hear more about the development of Sounds True. So, everyone, we'll be right back. You're listening to The Wellness Coach on Blog Talk Radio. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Wellness Coach on Blog Talk Radio. I'm your host, Edie Summers, and my incredible guest today is Tami Simon. She is the founder and publisher of Sounds True, which is an independent multimedia company dedicated to disseminating spiritual wisdom. Excuse me. Tami began studying with Reggie Ray in 2001 and began teaching Meditating with the Body introductory workshops in 2007. Excuse me. Her areas of special interest include authentic leadership and applying spiritual principles to organizational life. Tami lives in Boulder, Colorado with her partner, Julie Kramer. And you'll have to excuse my voice, just sort of, it's interesting how we're talking about voice, and you have to really just sort of give yourself, I guess, allowances for what your body does. And I found it so interesting how I just kind of want to do a recap for our listeners. I think the point that really sunk in for me is how you were talking about the reason that people might be afraid to meditate is because of what they might find there, which is shame, deep shame, and also the self-aggression that goes along with that. For having that
well,
deep
the truth
shame,
is we might find all kinds of things, which is the interesting thing, because we might also find unbelievable ecstasy, joy beyond anything we've ever conceived of. And that what happens actually is that when we're living in a mental world, everything starts becoming quite flat. There's a sense of our lives being somewhat flat and dry and repetitive, like, I have to do the dishes again, or I have to, check my computer again, or whatever it might be, whatever the repetitive chores are. And there's this phrase, Tamalgi Nangshen, which is a Tibetan phrase that has to do with taking the sacred world as ordinary. And so we actually come into a way of being where we miss that the world is sacred, everything being sacred, because we've exited this direct, rich, full experience of life, which can only be found in the immediacy of the body's reception of the world, and everything's being filtered through this very small place. But in that experiencing of the richness and the sacredness, we also experience everything. So anything we haven't wanted to experience, that's waiting for us too. So I just want to say that, because it's not like we tune into our body and we just find the muck. We actually find the full range of experience. But the thing is, people want the good parts without the bad parts. And that makes sense. I mean, I wanted that. I mean, I remember talking to Reggie, and I was like, look, I want all the highs, but I don't really want these lows. Do you have any other approach for me that will give me that? Because I don't like this part. And he was like, I wish I could help you, but I actually can't. It's a complete package. And that's, I think, a big thing for people to make peace with.
Mm-hmm.
That if you really do want the ecstatic elements of life and the full joy and richness, that there has to be a willingness to experience everything and have your heart break open in the midst of the world in which there's so much brokenheartedness.
And that's an interesting point, and that's a very profound point, actually, because I think that is where we get stuck, because we don't want to experience the brokenheartedness, and yet isn't the truth that we're experiencing it anyway? I mean, is it just that? Go ahead. I'm curious.
Well, I think that's part of that's part, I think, of the meditating with the body work, is that our body's taking it in, but we're not really feeling it. So we're not really in touch with it, but it's there, and that's why it's there waiting for us. So, like, you could take an example or something, like somebody has come into the room and, you know, they're really angry and they slam the door and they scream, and maybe at one level we think, you know, whatever, I'm not gonna worry about that. I'm not going to concern myself. But our body took in the loud noise. Our body absorbed that big scream and the anger and all of that. And so then when we go to meditate and we tune into our body, there is that felt sense of just the response to that loud scream is still there, waiting for us to experience it. And I've taken a very innocuous example, in a sense, of somebody just a loud scream in a room. But what if it's, you know, terrible grief, terrible loss that we didn't let ourselves really feel because we were afraid of being overwhelmed by it. But yet our body took it in. And then when we tune in, and the meditating with the body exercises, we're doing things like breathing into every cell of the body. So we're intentionally going through the body millimeter by millimeter, scanning and going in, and these experiences and memories are then available to come forward, and they've been stored in our tissues. You know, the saying, the issues are in the tissues. They've been stored there, and they come forward, and in a sense, that's our quote-unquote karma. That's everything that we've experienced to date that is then generating more life, but we haven't become aware of it. We haven't touched it. And we accelerate the opening of our karma through our lives when we take a few moments, we stop, and we tune in, and we actually allow ourselves to touch in to what's actually happening inside of us. It's huge, and that's why this kind of practice is so transformative.
And that is I really appreciate you saying that, because I just kind of had a little insight myself there, or understanding. So, I mean, I'm starting to wonder if maybe the real fear isn't the kind of facing, kind of like what you say, call it like the yucky stuff. It's more like being stuck. I mean, if you really think about it, like, I mean, isn't it human nature to want to keep moving forward? And yet I think a lot of us feel stuck, and maybe that's the reason. It's because if we haven't allowed ourselves to feel, to experience both the highs and the lows, then there is this sense of feeling stuck, or that time, or that things go, you don't progress as much, and therefore your life isn't as, like, there's always, I think that people are always wanting to experience more, and yet there's also this feeling of that they're not getting what they really want. Does that make sense? And I just, when you talked about,
well, yeah, I mean, it's like
karma,
we want to experience. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I think that people do want to experience.
People want to experience more, but they, I think, often want to experience more on their terms. And the thing is, it's on the mystery's terms. And that shift to saying, you know, things may change dramatically in my life, and that's okay. It's not, you know, it's like, yeah, I want to experience more, but don't touch my bank account, or, you know, or only if it goes up. I want to experience more, but, you know, want my life to be reconfigured. I don't want to have to really confront my partner or risk outgrowing my circle of friends or risk having to move from where I live to a new town or any of those kinds of risks. So we want to experience more, but are we actually open to the process of change in our life and to being a process of change?
I love how you say that. I've never heard it that way before. That is just so profound to me, being the process of change itself, as opposed to thinking that it's something outside of yourself or, like you were mentioning, intellectualizing it, because it can be this vicious cycle if we constantly think to ourselves, I need to change, and yet it's something that you experience as opposed to force yourself to do. It's just more of a unfolding.
Yeah, well, when I think of some of the work of Deepak Chopra when he talks about how the body that we have in 7 years, all the cells in our body will be new and different, and that in this sense we have a type of quantum body, a body that is a quantum field of change, and so we are the process of change. Impermanence is not a Buddhist idea that lives outside of us. We're this permanent, fixed entity, and things outside of us are impermanent. There's one impermanent thing going on, expressing itself in all of these impermanent moments of unfolding.
And also, I love how you say that. And also, we were mentioning earlier about being in that state of flow. And this is something that we talk about in wellness coaching, is when you're in that state of flow, that's when things, and again, it's not on your terms, but it's being present for the experience of life as it unfolds. And therefore, the change that happens as well. It becomes an effortless process. It sounds to me like, of course you have to show up. But I think that we tend to approach changing with resistance, which is the opposite of flow.
Yeah, I think the effort comes in not clenching up, not resisting, watching ourselves, watching how we leave the somatic level of experience because it's too intense.
Yes, so not checking out, like keeping our work is to stay tuned in.
Exactly.
That is
exactly.
That's kind of the becoming my little catchphrase here is take the time to tune in, and I think there's doesn't have to be scary. It can be exciting, and even both for the highs and the lows. I really appreciate this conversation, Tami, and it's really helping me, and I know that it's going to be helping other people too. And I wanted to ask you on the topic of transformation and changing, what exactly was the process like for you in developing Sounds True? I would love to know, as a woman and as an entrepreneur, and as for anyone who's hoping to step into that leadership position, what was that process like for you, for actually developing your company?
Yeah. There was a lot of magic in it, and it came from a place in me that was quite desperate and devoted. And it didn't come from being like, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm going to start a business. Or, I was a college dropout who had discovered the value of meditation and yet had no idea, zero idea, how I would make a contribution in the world. I had seriously disappointed my family. And I had this, I say devotion, I had this sense that the universe had given me so much in terms of the quality of education that I'd been allowed to have, in terms of being born in the United States into a family that loved me. And I had this really desperate urge to give, to the world and to make my life somehow a giving back to other people. And so this was the most profound thing alive in me at that time at age 21, which is, how am I going to use everything I've been given so that I can contribute and help other people with my life? How do I do that? And so I started praying really, really hard because I had no idea. I mean, if anything, it was going to be some combination of art and social change, which didn't really mean, I didn't know what that meant, except there's something about the power of human creativity, and gosh darn it, I want this world to be different. I want it to be a world that has some level of sanity and humanity in how we relate to each other to be the prevailing theme, not what I see around me. And so I didn't know, but I prayed, and I prayed this prayer: God, I'm willing to do your work. Please show me what it is. And I said it again and again and again. And in using the word God, what I meant by that was just, oh, beautiful universe, oh, intelligent, good, beautiful universe. You know, I'm here and I want to do your work, whatever it is. And I didn't care if it was, you know, sweeping or cleaning out the refrigerators or whatever. I mean, I wanted a sense that I would be shown something that felt to me that it was God's work. And the word willing was very important to me because I didn't want to be willful. I didn't want it to have to be on my terms, like, you know, this is it. This, you know, I'm going to willfully push this through no matter what. But I also wasn't will-less. I wasn't just like, you know, hanging out, waiting to be discovered, drinking a malt in a drugstore or something. I was like, I'm willing. I am here and I am willing, but I'm going to need some help. Will you show me? Wow. And there was tremendous sincerity in that. And I think some of that, you know, there's something about being 21 where there is at least for me, a naivete, a sense of anything possible, but also a kind of, I don't know, I was completely wholehearted and desperate, both, really, truly. And
I love how you say that.
I think it's true, and something,
I love it.
What came from that prayer is that I met someone that I was interviewing for my volunteer radio show while I was waitressing at the Chinese restaurant, and I mentioned to him that I had just inherited this small amount of money and that I didn't know what to do with it, and that I didn't really want to put it in the bank because I wasn't sure that it would do any good sitting in a bank. And he looked at me and he said, Tami, you know what you want to do. And I was like, well, actually, I beg to differ with you. I don't. If I did, I would, you know, I actually don't know what I want to do.
I wouldn't have asked.
And he said, why don't you think about this for 3 days and then come back and talk to me? And this very interesting thing happened when I walked out of his office, which is I suddenly had this feeling that I wasn't quite walking on the ground. It was a very odd feeling. Oh, wow. But it was like my body felt really different, and I felt like I was sort of walking 2 feet above the ground. And then I heard a voice, and I don't know if it was an internal voice or an external voice, I don't know. But I heard these words, disseminate spiritual wisdom. Wow. And there was a sense of how it all landed and felt in me. I had read a book in college called Focusing by Eugene Genlin, and he talked about the felt sense and how you could feel in your body what was the right direction to move in. And so I knew that in hearing these 3 words, disseminate spiritual wisdom, there was something happening in my body that didn't feel like anything I'd ever felt before in my whole life. And so I knew I had to pay special attention to this. And in a sense, I felt like those 3 words were a gift that was being given to me as an answer to the prayer that I had been saying. And it just felt wholly right, disseminate spiritual wisdom. And then, of course, I had to engage in a rational process. Well, you know, okay, that's a great idea, but, you know, how am I going to do that? What? And it was just clear I could go through books, I could go through audio, I could go through video. I didn't want to use the medium of books, mostly because I had read so much in college and had found it kind of grueling. And I also thought so many people have successfully been in the book publishing world. That seems like a pretty competitive world to enter. I don't think that's a good place to start. And I didn't want to go into video because there was a lot of television watched in my family, and I thought it numbed people to sleep. But then when I thought I could disseminate spiritual wisdom through audio, I thought, well, I have a radio show. I love listening. I love the human voice, all of these things. I thought, why don't I start there?
Oh, perfect. So it was kind of just taking it further and deeper where you already were, but with the answer to your prayer, which sounded very like it was very active, and there was a very active process there, I think, but also receiving. I mean, we were talking earlier about receiving, right? I'm wondering is that a form of receiving as well? Like when you say a prayer like that, and then it sounds like you did receive in a very big way. Is that the same thing as being in an intimate relationship?
Yeah. Well, I think part
or
of
is
it is
different?
that the intelligence of the universe is speaking all the time, and it's often speaking through other people. And so it was speaking through this gentleman that I was interviewing for the radio who happened to be a very successful entrepreneur. And there was something through him when he said, you know what you want to do. That was the universe speaking to me. And when I say I want to discover the depth of love in my life that's possible, then my partner, Julie, the universe is speaking through her when she says, well, then leave your iPhone behind and come away with me for a week. That's the universe speaking through, and yes, it's through her.
Yes.
So there's part of it which is that we don't navigate in some kind of spacesuit on our own, just listening to ourselves. The world is talking to us all the time.
And thank goodness that it is, and how beautiful that it is, that we're not in this alone. I think it's easy to think that we feel separate, and yet it sounds to me like this is all about kind of, again, tuning in and showing up and receiving, and then allowing life to unfold in the way that it's allowing the beauty of your life to unfold without an agenda, right? But at the same time showing up for it, whatever is unfolding.
Yeah, I think a very big insight that I had early on, and maybe this goes back to even where we started our conversation, where I was talking about the books of Herman Hesse and Alan Watts, is that there's one huge interdependent universe or presence occurring. So we're more like cells in a universal body. And so a cell has a permeable membrane and is being impacted and affected all the time. It's not isolated. It doesn't live on its own. It would be dead in less than a heartbeat if it was somehow taken out. You can't take out any one of us from the whole. And there's a sense when that's actually deeply known and experienced, and for some people that experience comes from some type of LSD trip or ayahuasca or something like that, or it comes from reading a book like reading Siddhartha and having it described that way, but not as a thought, but as a known experience, then everything changes from that one deep realization if it can actually be felt all the way through.
And that reminds me of, thank you so much for saying that, and it reminds me of, am I saying his name correctly, Eckhart Tolle? He said that, Eckhart Tolle, he said that I think presence is a felt sense of oneness with all beings, or something along those lines. And it's that phrase of a felt sense. To me, that's what's really resonating here. I mean, there are many, many things, many insights I'm having, and I just appreciate this conversation so much. And I want to respect your time too, Tami, and I want to definitely mention the links to all of your websites. But I just really want to express my gratitude for. I'm starting to feel more the felt sense of oneness and beingness, and I really appreciate you expanding on that for me, that concept, and making it feel much more real. And so I just wanted to thank you for that. So I think that is
beautiful.
definitely one of your gifts.
It's been fun talking with you. You're a good listener.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And it's just been my pleasure and my honor. And I do want to respect your time. However, if you want to stay, you can stay. But we're coming up on the hour here, and I definitely want to make sure that is there anything? Of course, I want to mention your website in general is soundstrue.com. And that's just like it sounds, soundstrue.com. But is there anything specifically that you want to let people know about that's coming up, or programs, or we mentioned the Self-Acceptance Project, Insights from the Edge, but please, is there anything that you would like to specifically let people know about?
The only thing that occurs to me is that at the end of October, we'll be offering a free live stream with Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh. And if people have never experienced Thich Nhat Hanh, he's a beautiful teacher, and it's on touching the wonders of life in the moment. And I would just think that might be something people would enjoy. That's what occurs to me. It's at the end of October. But if you go to soundstrue.com and type in his name, Thich Nhat Hanh, into the search results, you'll find it.
Perfect. Thank you so much for letting us know about that. And so, Tami, I just want to leave this with you. If you, like I said, we're coming up on the hour here. I want to respect your time. Do you feel like, I feel like we have a really great conversation here. How do you feel? Do you want to continue, or do you feel like this is good?
This feels like a wonderful stopping point.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I so appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to speak with me. Again, it's an honor for me. And thank you so much for this beautiful hour. Just talk about spiritual wisdom. There's just an amazing array and amount of spiritual wisdom in this hour for people to listen to and absorb. So I wanted to thank you again for coming on my show, and and thanks again also for creating Sounds True. I've been listening to your interviews for years, and they've absolutely helped me. So I can think of one in particular with is it Carolyn Mace? Or I'm sorry, not Carolyn Mace. It was the lady who wrote. I just want to mention this because it really affected me. Let me think of her name. She was a Candace Pert. I did an interview with her, and maybe you've done several interviews with her, but she was talking about how your body is your subconscious mind. Was that you interviewed her?
Yeah.
That was, I've listened to many interviews with you that have, with other people that are, and I highly recommend to people that they definitely check out Sounds True for your just phenomenal interviews. They're just one of a kind. But the amount of spiritual wisdom that you do learn is phenomenal, and that is one of many that stood out for me. But that really affected me on a very profound level, and in addition to this conversation. So, on that note, I just wanted to say thank you for your work.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tami. So,
okay.
And thanks again, and I will talk to you maybe at some other point. And have a great day.
Okay, you too. God bless you.
Thanks.
And the good work you're doing.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. And everyone, thanks so much for tuning in. You've been listening to The Wellness Coach on Blog Talk Radio. Thanks for tuning in, and take care.